Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 4, session 2B, Climate Justice Fellows, session 1. My name is Ariel Wharton, and I'm a climate change specialist for the University of Maryland, specifically SIEGE. The Climate Justice Fellows program is a groundbreaking initiative led by the Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice, and Health at the University of Maryland School of Public Health. This 21-week immersive virtual training and implementation program is designed to equip individuals with essential knowledge about environmental justice and climate justice principles. The Climate Justice Fellows program places a significant emphasis on the Capstone Project, which serves as a culminating experience for the cohort members. This project is cohort members led, along with allowing fellows to take ownership of their work while receiving guidance and support from Ariel Wharton, myself, Dr. Wilson, and SIEGE. The Capstone Project provides an opportunity for fellows to apply the knowledge and skills they have gained throughout the program to a real-world environmental justice problem in a community of concern within the DMV or Mid-Atlantic region. By addressing a local environmental, climate, or energy justice challenge, cohort members can make a positive impact in their partner community and actively bolster environmental and climate justice initiatives. In this session, fellows will present their capstone projects. Capstone topics in this session will focus on analyzing cumulative impact bills, improving other and future bills, cumulative impact assessments, rebuilding EJ communities' involvement and activism after COVID-19, and the importance of climate action plans within these communities. Our fellows will showcase their community projects that are dedicated to making strides in addressing climate and environmental injustices. Welcome, everyone, and thank you, fellows. I'm now going to introduce our panel. First up, we have Richard Coxum. He is a climate change and sustainability advisor, within the Columbia Association. Next, we have Cynthia Herrera, and she represents certified weed. She's a certified weed warrior, Cynthia, at the City of Baltimore Recreation and Parks. Then we have Laura Schmidt. She's a research aide within Sussex Health and Environmental Network, SHEN. And last but not least, we have Zaki Lewis, who is a youth member at Brown Grove Preservation Group. Welcome. I hope you are all as excited as I am. And we are so happy to be here today, and we encourage questions from our audiences. Please, I will just let you know that we will answer the questions at the end of everyone's presentation, just so that we can be more efficient on time. So first up, we do have Richard. So please, Richard, take the wheel.
Thank you, Ariel.
I should say.
Can everyone see my screen? Alrighty. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay. So good afternoon, and depending on when you watch this, good morning and good evening. My name is Richard Coxum. Thank you for that introduction, Ariel. So this project, my capstone, focused specifically on the history of cumulative impact bills in Maryland and doing an assessment and leveraging existing research that's been done to kind of see what path forward we can take in this area. So first, want to give an overview of what we're going to be talking today. So want to give some acknowledgments to start, go over the cumulative impacts, its ties to environmental justice, successful initiatives across the states, the history of legislation in Maryland, and a potential path forward. So pausing here real quick, I want to flag that essentially every day of this symposium, there has been a wonderful panel or specific topic area focusing on cumulative impacts, starting with day one on environmental justice, cumulative impacts, and environmental decision-making, foundational concepts. On day two, we had the environmental justice and impacts, lessons learned from state and local governments in terms of permitting. And yesterday, there was a session on cumulative impacts and progress in the Mid-Atlantic. So following that trend with today's discussion point. So first and foremost, I want to give acknowledgments to thank everyone that's helped me. There's a saying my mom used to like to say about giving flowers when people can appreciate them. So before I begin, I want to thank my parents, for sharing their stories of growing up with environmental injustice exposure. I want to thank my wife and siblings for their support, and then thank my mentors. Also thank Ariel and Dr. Wilson and the whole Siege platform and my fellow capstone members or fellow program members for putting this together to give helping lead the way in this space and giving us all a voice in this area with this platform. So starting with cumulative impacts and environmental justice, we're going to focus primarily on the EPA definition of both cumulative impacts and environmental justice, because a lot of the research that has been done in this space on the federal level comes out of that group. Dr. Charles Lee was one of the speakers on multiple panels, viewed as one of the premier experts in this area and leading this way. Cumulative impacts, as seen by this slide, kind of discuss the totality of impacts of exposures of chemical and non-chemical stressors and their effect on health, well-being, quality of life outcomes, and how they tie into the broader environmental justice space. So if you look at the graphic, it kind of shows how this all impacts that. This is pulled from a report done by the EPA on their Office of Research and Development on specifically focusing on recommendations that they have. So given that the focus is on Maryland, I want to point to the fact that in Maryland, previous research that has been leveraged and done by others really point to the impacts are predominantly leaning towards impacting Black and low-income communities with a disproportionate proximity to environmental hazards and increased social vulnerability. Because of the research that's been done, it really kind of shows how it's very easy for spirals to kind of be implemented where one stressor impacts another stressor, which further exacerbates the problems that we've seen, specifically around health impact considerations and how this impacts the quality of life that people face. So the shape of cumulative impact assessments vary from state to federal to local levels as well. And as other panels have mentioned earlier in other sessions, the variance across the state, local, and federal level is a very important reason why it's not necessarily just plug and play from state to state, but there's positive outcomes in the fact that there is areas for this to take lessons learned, very specific lessons learned, and apply it for very unique and specific instances moving forward. So on that front, there have been 183 laws, executive orders, regulations, policies, constitutional provisions that pertain to environmental justice across America. 35 of them specifically pertain to cumulative impacts across Massachusetts, New Jersey, North Carolina, Rhode Island, Oregon, California, Maine, Georgia, Vermont, Puerto Rico, Washington, Virginia, Michigan, New York, Delaware, Connecticut, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina. A lot of the panelists earlier mentioned that, or a lot of the sessions in previous days mentioned how, again, since it's not a plug and play situation, there are variances across what these look like. Some of them have been deemed more successful than others. A notable one that was spoken on ad nauseum, believed throughout the symposium was the work being done in New Jersey, and that's been done in New York. And then at the federal level, there's been attempts to get cumulative impacts legislation, most recently in July of this year. And I want to thank the state-by-state EJ database, which is, I think, a huge resource for this kind of looking at one-to-one areas or leveraging an educational knowledge base that can kind of help as we kind of find a path forward to get this implemented on a broader scale, specifically in Maryland. So looking at what we can see works, what would pertain specifically to communities that have been impacted in Maryland, and kind of acknowledging some of the specific geologic and regional considerations that have to be made. So this table is pulled from the previous research that's been done in the area. So these are the three main kind of pointed previous attempts at getting cumulative impact legislation moving forward in the state. Unfortunately, they weren't necessarily successful, but I will point to the fact that I like to say, as with some of the other work we've seen in this space, they did lay a foundation or bricks that can be built upon. So each one, while there wasn't the success that was being looked for, they did provide sort of a path forward. So, for example, pulling from a previous state example, in Minnesota in 2008, they passed legislation on pollution control agencies for like a mini NEPA provision. We saw sort of some of that language filter through in some of the later provisions that have been pushed forward in Maryland and that advocates have been trying to move forward. And looking at one of the more recent unsuccessful ones in HB 517 that kind of wanted to make an amendment into the Maryland Constitution that pertained to the right for a certain clean and healthy environment. The language, again, from each one of these has been built upon. And I think that is a key point worth noting moving forward as, we look at a path forward. So there have been challenges as they've faced. Some of these weren't successful for various reasons, but we do have the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022, which has led to a lot of great progress in the state, as though it does not necessarily pertain to cumulative impacts. It does put an emphasis on equity and other considerations that may not have necessarily been a priority under previous administrations. So focusing on the building blocks and lessons learned from each one of these, whether they were successful or unsuccessful, taking the positives from what we've seen. One thing that we've heard a lot, and that I know Dr. Wilson has focused on primarily, is stakeholder engagement and stakeholder empowerment. So looking to work with the communities to make sure that they have the tools and resources needed to kind of advocate more for themselves and kind of do some broader coalition building. And I think that's important because in a program like the fellowship that we completed, one major takeaway is kind of the benefits of what's available and what's there, right? I think we're in a time where we're uniquely positioned, not just with IRA and bill, the legislation, to leverage billions upon billions of dollars to see remediation and work done in these areas, but to kind of make sure that it's codified and it's not just a flash in the pan, right? So making sustained changes that can outlive some of the funding while we have the political will in the area that we do. So again, highlighting some of the research that was done by the ORD. So the ORD is the Office of Research and Development, and their report, which the final draft was released earlier this year, again, kind of pointing to the timing of there's never been a better time than now to see this kind of development done. These are things that have been acknowledged by many in the environmental justice community, and especially in terms of trying to get legislation forward around cumulative impacts. Getting that stakeholder engagement in the decision-making context. So there's been many groups and advocacy organizations that have been speaking throughout this week. And I think that's just a great way to kind of encapsulate all the efforts that are going on collectively in this area, the scientific considerations and partnering, understanding that no one agency or group is an island. No one group can kind of do it by themselves. This really takes an all hands in approach. So as we see these support mechanisms being put up through the regional technical assistance centers, through other entities that are receiving funding specifically from federal legislation, we're seeing more and more coalescing around the areas to see this succeed in a long-term sense. So one thing that we kind of can look to is, for example, the Maryland Climate Pathway Report was recently released. It's undergoing a public listening session to get more feedback. There's an online session scheduled for September 26th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Highly recommend tuning in for that. But looking at reports like that, seeing equity being mentioned in the report, but maybe not necessarily a focal point, there is obviously still work to be done. That's not to say that for all the progress we have seen, there's, the work's never done. So those are some of the potential paths forward. And then on the second part, again, in terms of the research and funding that's been put out more recently. So the model resource that was put out in partnership, I believe, between We Act and the University of Columbia, the grid deployment, grid operations, decarbonization, environmental and energy equity platform, Go Deep. So that's an initiative being led by Pacific Northwest National Lab and with federal funding to kind of do human well-being and equity considerations from a health standpoint and just a overall person, like the impacts on persons that have a tie into what this decarbonization pathway looks like. So making sure people aren't left behind and what factors and indicators need to be tracked for that. And then more specifically at a very micro local level in Howard County, I'm now a Howard County resident, formerly a Prince George's County resident, but looking at some of the executive orders and climate action and resiliency plans that are being put forward at the very local level. Seeing what it looks like and being mindful of, when we talk about regional considerations, it is very important to not lose sight of the things that make up our state. So making sure no community is left behind. I think Howard County is in a very unique place in that they had the funding and the political will has been there to kind of make these kind of adjustments in these plans. And so building upon, what would a version of this look like in other counties throughout Maryland? What are some commonalities there that need to be considered as you kind of build up towards seeing like a statewide version of a cumulative impact? So, there might not be as much need for a CAFO or animal feed operation considerations in Howard County as there might be in other parts of Maryland, but what kind of stormwater resiliency initiatives? Ellicott City had some flooding in the past few years, a historic amount. So looking at kind of county-specific considerations that need to be made so that there is a framework that can be put in place so that resiliency and the cumulative impacts of not just the positive and negatives, or not just the negatives, but also the positive outcomes that come from some of this legislation and investment we can track. So I did focus a lot on the negatives throughout some of this, but I do want to highlight, there is an opportunity for positive investment. So when we track the funds that are coming from the federal government and from the state level, just making sure it's equitable in how it's spread out. So that can all be part of the consideration for these impacts. So with that, I believe I am approaching time. So I will say thank you. And I will end there.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much. Definitely, you were right on point with hearing about cumulative impacts literally every day for this symposium. Extremely relevant as of right now too. So I do appreciate you choosing this topic. I was going to say tropic. Sorry. And yeah, great presentation, and thank you for being a part of this group. If anybody has questions for Richard, please drop it in the chat and we will circle back once we complete everyone's presentations. So next up, we have Cynthia Herrera. Cynthia, you have the floor.
All right. Hey, everyone. Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. My name is Cynthia Herrera, and on the theme of people, power, and politics, I look to identify social determinants of health using geospatial tools to connect Spanish speakers to the watershed. Our big question was on equity. How do we go about identifying EJ communities, especially those living in the shadows? We're going to see how Defensores de la Cuenca are doing just that. There's the video. All right. So after reading about the watershed defenders or Defensores de la Cuenca in a recent Baltimore Magazine feature, I reached out to them. I was drawn to their values of access to education and the experiences and leadership to communities. They were founded 3 years ago. It's a Latino-led nonprofit, and it serves the DMV area and beyond, connecting people to the watershed and also to nature and each other. The Defenders of the Watershed offer connection and healing, but they also know that communities they want to reach are operating from a place of survival mode. So they ensure the experiences they curate are welcoming and include safety and accessibility. So providing food and transportation, because they know that dominant Spanish-speaking communities and their most vital resource is their time. EPA defines EJ, or environmental justice, as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. But the Defenders of the Watershed don't lead with the EJ talk. They first work to educate Latino communities on the important role that the environment has on our lives, on our health and well-being, and the impact that we have on it. They do so by creating an inviting atmosphere for folks to make meaningful connections while telling our stories and expressing our culture, faith, and love of nature. Accessibility is a big one too. They're creating inviting activities where all needs are met. There are paid volunteer and apprenticeship opportunities that alleviate the burden and connect people with nature, so folks are comfortable in green spaces. They believe that with the access to the right resources, the Latino community can be empowered by their own ability and become strong and confident leaders, advocating for things important to them. Just last year, they had successful events teaching fishing fundamentals, even securing fishing licenses. So for anyone who wanted to enjoy fishing all year round, which is pretty cool. And as we talked, Abel, the co-founder, and his team identified challenges engaging with Latino communities in Virginia. And as we were working together, we wanted to develop an assessment on the area of Fredericksburg to examine data that can better speak to the Latino community there about what's important to them and their daily lives. Now, just looking at from a quick glimpse of this regular map of Fredericksburg, we identified a couple of things. We see a watershed, we see crossing highways, and an airport nearby. And so this is what we set out to study. So we wanted a cumulative impact assessment. Our area was Fredericksburg, Virginia. We looked to serve BIPOC Spanish speakers in Fredericksburg and identified as disadvantaged. Who will benefit? We were looking at our target audience to be Spanish dominant, recent arrivals, hard to reach communities with no disposable income. And the tools that we found useful were the EPA EJ screen and the Climate and Economic Justice screening tool to track social determinants of health. So the social determinants of health, I'm going to share preliminary results. They examined the combined effects of various stressors on the community. I picked geospatial tools because they're a powerful ally in the fight for environmental and climate justice. These tools allow us to visualize and explore patterns of environmental and climate hazards. They also reveal burdens that certain communities are facing. The aggregate data is accessible to us as community advocates and important in understanding the complexities of our work, especially engaging with hard-to-reach communities. Here is an EJ index, and the index helps screen for potential EJ concerns. It combines the data on low-income and people of color populations with a single environmental indicator. This is a great snapshot and is accessible through the tool, and it gives you an idea of the landscape of what you're looking at. Then I looked at the EPA EJ screen, and this is a snapshot as well. This tool, I was able to toggle to different neighborhoods within Fredericksburg to pull data points, which varied in terms of population, et cetera. There was also some identified points like high percentage in limited English speaking and traffic proximity. The climate and economic justice screening tool here, it's also used to identify disadvantaged communities and serves the Justice 40 initiative. It includes a census tract and highlights burdens for a quick analysis if needed. And what I like about this one is that if you are looking at different communities, they will highlight areas that are of real concern and are identified burdens if they have a percentile of 90 plus. Data shows multiple vulnerabilities here, from proximity to risk management plan facilities to proximity to Superfund sites to wastewater discharge. Although I found the tool to be user-friendly, super quick to use, one limitation for the census tract data was that recent arrivals and Spanish speakers are not all accounted for, as Latino families continue to live in the shadows of our immigration process. Therefore, this tool doesn't adequately represent the true population of Spanish speakers, but it gives us a good idea of where we can get a head start. And based on the EPA administrator definition, Fredericksburg identifies as a disadvantaged community. And there on the screen, it shows you a couple of different reasons as to why it is identified as disadvantaged, which is super valuable because when we're talking about policy change or when we're talking about finding funding opportunities, having metrics and evidence to support your work and your presence in communities is vital. So the identified burdens that were the most alarming were climate change threats and legacy pollution, lead paint, and projected flood risks. And so next steps, I want to check out the Park Equity Mapper tool. That's another tool to kind of find gaps in access to green and natural infrastructure. And then I also want to check out the Maryland EJ screen tool just to see if there's anything that is different from the other tools that I've used. And then thinking of some recommendations for next steps for watershed defenders would be to reach out to the EJ TICTAC region to support grant writing and capacity building using the data from this EJ screening tool and metrics that identify Fredericksburg as a disadvantaged community, but also to advocate for integrated language access funding for all EJ community engagement, because the more we do this work, the more we realize that funding is limited when it comes to building and supporting communities at a baseline. And so that would be something to incorporate with NEJAC comment period, mandating language access funds as a baseline for all EJ community engagement. And I'll leave you guys with this. We know that the importance of this work is to reduce harm, to help distribute benefits to the overlooked, and to institutionalize EJ. This is a quote from Abel, the founder. In terms of climate change and resiliency, we need to better equip this community to be a part of the workforce, to be a part of the conversation. If we continue to sideline or ignore Latino and Spanish-speaking communities, if we continue to ignore their need to access green space to improve air and water quality, it will result in a sicker populace. And with that, I say thank you. If you would like to support Defensores de la Cuenca, you're promoting Latino leadership in outdoor spaces, there is QR code and other information to get you started. Thanks.
Thank you, Cynthia, and happy Hispanic Heritage Month. That was really, really great. I do appreciate that You focused on the use of mapping tools to assess the, disparities within Latino Spanish-speaking neighborhoods, especially in Virginia. Some spaces aren't as touched upon, I think, within Virginia versus, say, Maryland. So yeah, I'm happy that you chose such a important topic as well. I mean, all of the topics are important, to be fair, but I might just be biased because I've worked with you all so closely. So, but thank you. And our next fellow, our next presenter is Laura Schmidt. You have the floor.
Awesome. Can everyone hear me and see my slides? Awesome.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm Laura. I had the pleasure of being in this program, and for my capstone, I decided to focus on a case study of the area of Seaford, Delaware, which currently there is a biogas facility that is in the works of being constructed. And so I decided to focus on community perspective of the area. It is an environmental justice community, and a lot of their voices have been not acknowledged in the process. So the Bioenergy Innovation Center is produced by the Maryland-based company Bioenergy DevCo. They purchased a pelletizing plant from Purdue in 2020 to create a facility in which the process of anaerobic digestion would be used to create biogas, which is pitched as a renewable source of energy that may reduce the heavy reliance on fossil fuels. Now, this seems like an awesome idea, but there is definitely, it's not black and white, and we will go further into that. So the science behind the plant is basically, it occurs when organic matter, which in this case is going to be focusing on poultry waste, is broken down in the absence of oxygen to produce biogas. This process is strongly supported by a lot of environmental groups as a way to cut down energy costs and kind of as a movement towards combating the climate crisis. So as great as this sounds, as I mentioned before, there's definitely a lot of greenwashing that happens within the biogas industry. Biogas can actually have a lot, and does have a lot of harmful byproducts in its production. These include carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrogen sulfide, and ammonia. The two that are particularly harmful in these areas definitely include methane and ammonia. The facilities are often advertised as being kind of able to capture these, and actually lots of research has shown that there's quite a bit of leakage of methane, particularly towards the surrounding communities. So as well, along with these can be extremely detrimental for public health. There has been evidence of increase of asthma rates, respiratory diseases. It can increase the death rate. And in this particular area, there has been an increase of cancer rates amongst the residents. Along with this, obviously, it's not perfect, and because of the byproducts, there's also actually impacts towards climate change. So yeah, it's definitely pitched as an idea that is actually not as strong as it could be. There is some research that's happening around it in order to kind of advance the technology behind it. But right now, what's happening is a lot of these facilities are being permitted without really strong data to support their ability to combat the crisis. Another big important environmental hazard that is associated with this facility would be the transportation of poultry waste. This particular facility requires and permits the transportation of over 200,000 tons of poultry waste across 4 states within the Delmarva region. Along with, the particulate matter and effects of that can come from that transport. Transport and traffic pollution is also a key issue that comes with this. With those, it permits 199 vehicle trips per day, and there will be approximately 73,000 vehicle trips per year. So when you think about, the cumulative impact of that just in all of the different areas, it's definitely one that needs to be acknowledged. So just to show you all how I kind of focused on this, I am showing you here where the Bioenergy Innovation Center is on. It's actually on a road called Enviro Way, which is interesting. So just to show you, that's kind of how I looked into it, and that directly correlates with EJScreen, which is an awesome mapping tool that's kind of already been discussed by some of the other fellows. And so clearly, we see that within the exact region of the facility, there are quite a bit of environmental injustices that are happening, particularly with proximity to Superfund sites, toxic releases in the air, particulate matter release, and hazardous waste proximity. Now, another thing I want to mention is that later on, when I focus on the community that I worked with, it actually has quite a few people that are limited English speakers. Most of them come from a Haitian Creole background. So when you look at the other areas that surround the facility, you can kind of see actually those indexes as well. They're high percentiles, and that's very important to include. Also within that, you can see the racial demographic, the income, which is very key in this case. And many of these people are actually coming into work with this industry as they, need a way to make income. So they're kind of forced into a system that is perpetually a cycle of environmental injustice. And here you can see an exact showing of the facility and all of the CAFOs that actually surround it. CAFOs are concentrated animal feeding operations. And then this particular area is actually cited as an agriculture site, but as you can see, there are quite a few residential neighborhoods that are within this area, particularly mobile home neighborhoods. So, and lots of religious sites as well, lots of churches, which I actually went to one for this particular project, which we'll get into. So along with this, as a result of this facility being pitched, there was actually a Title VI complaint that was filed in December 2022 against the Delaware Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control, also known as DENREC, and Sussex County for violating the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. This was submitted by the Socially Responsible Agriculture Project, Sussex Health and Environmental Network, the American Civil Liberties Union of Delaware, the Delaware Poor People's Campaign, Delaware State Conference branched on the NAACP as well. And it particularly focuses on the fact that the community surrounding this facility was really not informed of the impacts that this could hold. There was not really notice to the public about permit applications. There were a couple hearings offered, but they were not offered in other languages, which obviously in this area is a key issue. Along with that, there were no interpretation services or translation services that were provided. And yeah, just in general, quite a few of the community members, actually most of them, just lack access to information regarding the project. So there are 17 principles of key principles of environmental justice, and this particular project focused on 5 that all have to do with the right to self-determination, the right to decision-making at every level, which these folks have been cut out of, thus the Title VI complaint, the rights of workers to have a healthy, safe, and general environment and work environment. There are clearly a lot of issues that come with this, just being exposed right outside in your home, as well as in the working conditions. And then, the need for both urban and rural areas to be clean and help the communities rebuild while honoring the cultural integrity of the communities, which in this region seems to be quite an issue. So prior to me going and doing this project, there was a lot of previous community outreach in this community. So some of them actually had some of the information, but when I went, it was clear that there was still quite a bit of misunderstanding. So we will get into that. So I went on August 26th and conducted a community conversation and survey. I went with Maria Payan of the Sussex Health and Environmental Network, along with Gabby Ross and Michael Payan. I have had the absolute pleasure of working with Maria for many years, and so it was an honor to join her again with this. We also had the support of local nurse practitioner Imani Dorval, and she has regularly done work with this organization and this movement as well. And she provided translation services, which was wonderful, hugely helpful. So now I'm going to go into some findings from this research. For the demographic data, which I originally collected, I focused on age, gender, the race and ethnicity, total household income, and how long residents had been in the area. So the age range was huge. I mean, there were everyone from children to folks that were over the age of 59. Most of the folks that participated in the survey were women. All of them self-identified as Haitian, Black or African American, or both. 50% had a total household income of 0 to 29,000, and that's total household income. Actually, only 1 out of the 30 had a total household income of over 100,000. So clearly, this is quite a low-income area, and it was a mix of mostly new residents. So, guests for that could be folks that were coming in to work for the industry, or folks that had been there for quite a while, over 10 years. So when it comes to thoughts and concerns on community health, 76.7% of participants ranked their community as being somewhat healthy. It's key to note that for a lot of these questions, we kept it fairly simple to kind of, support the folks that had limited English. So somewhat healthy is not great. I mean, that could be a big range, but it's definitely something to acknowledge. And that same number of folks were concerned about the health impacts of large industrial projects. It's also clear that anaerobic digestion is still a very new concept to many. Only 10% of the folks we did the survey for actually felt familiar with the processes behind it. 60% said they needed way more information on if it would help the area with waste management, and 20% believed that it would not help at all. Along with this, the majority of folks had concerns about how it would impact their health and well-being. So with that, there's definitely a clear lack of communication between the community and those behind the project. Many of them were not familiar with the name of the company, the work that occurs at the plant, what it produced, and how it can affect their home environment. Also, key to note is that when the government reached out to the community, or when asking if that occurred, no one said yes. And only 10% of the participants attended a public hearing. As I stated before, the public hearing was offered in English and Spanish, or it says online that it was, but that community is predominantly Haitian Creole. So that obviously does not help them, understand what's going on. So some other questions that I asked was what environmental justice means to them. And this is kind of a word map of the key themes that were stated in the survey. So obviously you see terms like healthy and including everyone, making sure things are clean. There's some key points about fairness, pollution. So yeah, those were all kind of common trends amongst the responses. And then these are actually some direct quotes from folks that wanted more information. They wanted they have the right to an environment that's pure. They want to make the community safe. This community was vibrant. They were wonderful to work with. I mean, when we walked in, kids immediately came up and hugged us without even knowing who we were. So, it's clear that they are a community that cares about their environment and each other, and it's incredibly saddening that they are not being included in this process. So what's next? I intend on continuing to research and doing community engagement events. I would like to offer this survey or surveys similar on online platforms, and with that use services that provide translation, as well as making sure that that's a key part to just make sure everyone's voice is included. And we are still staying updated with the project progress as we await the EPA's response. With that, the EPA just opened the Title VI complaint, which is exciting, but at the same time, permits were given to the facility to start construction. So, you know, there's definitely a gap there, and the fact that it was already permitted presents some pretty big issues. And we're hopeful that the EPA's, you know, consideration of the complaint comes in and kind of maybe halts the project or at least provides some clarity and some aid towards the community. So yeah, that was my project, and I really appreciate all of the support that I've had throughout the process. And if you have any questions, just go ahead and pop them in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Oh, definitely. You know how I feel about this one. Yeah, I'm always, no matter how often, no matter how deep, you know, you're in the EJ work, it still shocks me to see, like, when you visually see the religious buildings or neighborhoods, like, directly within the same space, I should say, as these harmful facilities. So thank you for that. Please keep us updated on your the EPA like updates, I guess, in that space. I'm hoping that there is positive movement forward, because yeah, definitely it's crazy. It's so maddening and sad at the same time. So thank you so much. And last but not least, we have Zaki Lewis.
All right, can everybody see my screen? Hear me? Everything? Okay. Hi, my name is Zaki Lewis. I am also another climate justice fellow, and I am a member of the Brown Grove Preservation Group. A little background about myself. I am a recent graduate of the University of Virginia. I did sort of grow up in the Brown Grove community. I lived here about from birth to 2 years old. I have grandparents that live here, so I was here pretty much every summer holiday break, and I've over the time kind of seen how industrial encroachment really has changed the Brown Grove community. So I had a real motivation to really get involved with the Brown Grove Preservation Group after its establishment in 2020 due to various industrial developments coming into the community. But primarily what we have to speak about, for the Brown Grove community is it's in Hanover County, Virginia. It's a very rural residential area that was founded in 1870 by formerly enslaved people. It was an agricultural settlement, which over time kind of morphed into like a middle-class residential neighborhood. Really close-knit community that's seen a lot of industrial developments really break up kind of the ability for that close-knit community to really have its own sort of real residential feel. So what's pictured here is kind of like the community center, the community landmark, which is a Brown Grove Baptist Church. It was had various physical iterations over the years, but this is the current look right now, and it's actually celebrated its 150th anniversary in 2020. And a couple things about our community is that we have received our National Historic Landmark designation in 2023, and the year prior to that, we got our Virginia Historic District from the Virginia Landmarks Registry. So there are several real climate impacts or really climate inequities that we have seen happen in the last 50 or so years, maybe even longer than that. But primarily, I won't go into everything, but it's mainly there's a landfill, a construction debris facility, a concrete precasting plant, a regional airport, which actually displaced several of the residents in our area, and in the 1950s, the state of Virginia actually decided to split our community in half with the I-95 interstate northbound and southbound lanes. There's about 3 on each side, which actually the exit for the southbound and northbound lane goes into Lewistown Road. Of course, my last name being Lewis, we assume that that is kind of our family namesake, which is another big issue of ours. But other than that, our main issue that really brought together the community in the way to fight for our preservation of our community was the construction of a 1.1 million square foot Wegmans distribution center, which is in a lot directly adjacent from our church. It's right now, it is pretty much being finished built, but of course there's a lot of litigation going on, so they have not actually opened up and started working yet. But it's posed a lot of climate related issues, especially knowing that it's demolished about 15 acres of wetlands, which were protected by the Chesapeake Water Preservation area. It would be a 24/7, 365 operation, and it would add about 2,600 vehicle trips per day to our residential area. Others issues with this Wegmans distribution center is that a lot of the formal studies for the climate impacts were kind of overlooked or just not done in the way that they should have been to really figure out how these climate impacts are going to impact our whole community. There was really no open engagement from government agencies with our community. It's just kind of an issue with underrepresented communities is that they're not really involved in the government process. We've even learned that Governor Northam provided a $2.3 million subsidy for Wegmans to build in Virginia. And we actually invited several different government agencies and Northam himself to come out and really see the type of impact that that would have on our community. And nobody really came out to even hear what we had to say. So we also requested to go onto the property, knowing that a lot of the area had unmarked graves of former descendants, our ancestors, and we were not allowed to do that as well. The Army Corps of Engineers has failed to provide timely responses to the community in general, thereby keeping us in the dark about the whole process. So that's really what motivated our community to build this Crown Grove Preservation Group. Our main goal was really to preserve not only the history, but our homes in the residential area, knowing that industrial encroachment has really disbanded the whole community. I'm one of the very few young people that live near the area or that are still part of the Brown Grove community. And a lot of it is due to the industrial encroachment of having several different factory processes, and then even that large air-conditioned building being built right across from our community center. So it's really a lot of what we want to do is just protect and preserve our air, our water, in honor of our ancestors and for all generations. And we do that through like a multifaceted approach. We have do speaking engagements and networking. We do community service, community capacity, activism, and public outreach. And also we partner with different EJ and CJ community action packs that also help us really learn how to really redress a lot of the climate impacts that we've experienced over the last 5 or 6 decades. So getting into the climate action plan, just a basic understanding of it is it's a comprehensive strategy used for measuring, tracking, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions and adopting climate adaptation measures to reduce other climate impacts. It outlines specific initiatives designed to reduce greenhouse gases, mitigate the effects of climate change, and build community resilience in the face of a changing climate. But what's also important to go over is how to really integrate climate justice, climate equity, and how health impact assessments can really help us learn about how this climate change issue really affects not only the environmental health, but like the physical and mental health of our residents. So I had to really start in beginning stages, really figuring out how I was going to go about limiting the scope, really being able to like define and figure out what our main unique climate justice issues are, and not just general climate issues that everybody is dealing with. Because of course, living in such a rural residential area, you have your own unique climate impact issues that you had to go about. And of course, that's not something that, as an underrepresented group, you don't see a whole lot of attention to, like the very minute issues from smaller communities. So my first thing was to define the purpose, limit the immediate scope. Then really what I had to do was set realistic and achievable and actionable climate goals, figuring out a real timeline. Was it financially feasible for our community? What type of grants or even like micro grants would we have to really go about trying to apply for in order to help with us? But a real big issue was physical, legal, and social barriers. I know a lot in our community are very elderly and they're not as open to really changing their lifestyle a whole lot. So, and also learning about really how these climate impacts can really affect their day to day, of course. So what I really had to do was just bring this to our preservation group and really help them, allow them to kind of understand like how we can go about educating the public and really changing the way that we utilize energy, like the energy sources that we do use, and then figuring out how to go about fixing some of our primary issues, which are like flooding due to like the lack of resiliency infrastructure, and then heat mitigation and things of that nature. So yes, our the widespread climate issues, yes, for Hanover County, based off the study from Pennsylvania State University, is altered rainfall patterns, heat waves, droughts, extreme weather events, being like tornadoes, hurricanes, and flash floods. Flash floods probably being the most important for our community. So at least for our unique EJ issues, because of the destruction of 15 acres of wetland, of course, that's going to affect our ability to what's the word, mitigate like water, or like during flash floods we don't have the other resiliency infrastructure. So destroying the wetlands is really going to alter the water drainage and ability, and it's also going to affect our groundwater and soil pollutants due to like construction debris, the machines that they're bringing in to knock down trees and build their own infrastructure is really altering our groundwater and soil pollutants. Of course, there's greenhouse gas emissions due to like their degenerates that they bring in to develop their construction. So the index of my climate action plan was, first of all, it's an introduction, an overview, delineating what the environmental hazards were, and also the mitigation resilience goals that I had. Primarily, the focus was on number 3 and number 4 and number 5 for this, the mitigation resilience goals that I put on the next page. So everything from the greenhouse emissions, renewable energy, total energy usage, and groundwater soil reclamation, I kind of had to look at other climate action plans. Actually, Richmond, Virginia has a pretty comprehensive climate action plan that does include climate equity standards. So looking at that, then also looking at a smaller area, as in Charlottesville, Virginia, where I went to school, I looked at their climate action plan as well, and kind of learned how to go about writing a type of a comprehensive climate action plan for such a small community that doesn't have a whole lot of climate related data. So my standards went by 2030. I went by a 10% reduction in residential greenhouse gas emissions. Renewable energy, I hope to increase that by 10%. Total energy reduction by 10%, and reclaiming at least 10% of the degraded, polluted groundwater, specifically from a lot of these industrial developments that have really taken a lot of the arable land that we had, knowing that a lot of our residents do utilize well water but aren't able to drink it because it's no longer potable due to groundwater pollution, is main focus of mine on kind of mitigating any sort of like additional flood issues in our area, and soil erosion and water drainage due to the kind of variety of construction projects that are going on. But I thought what was most important was really to be able to establish a community resilience hub. And of course, Brown Grove Baptist Church kind of being our community landmark, I decided that that would be the best place in order to go ahead and build some sort of resilience hub that has food access, water access, electricity, and Wi-Fi access. What was primarily important was really anything related to like the soil erosion and groundwater issues. And from my research, I was able to figure out that rainwater collection and building a community garden would be two very realistic things to do, at least at first, for the resiliency hub. And then, of course, more expensive, more long-term things that we should be doing are like reflective roofing for heat mitigation and solar panels and generators. But initially, it's just being able to sort of reclaim part of our groundwater pollution, and the soil erosion would be most important. But all of this has to go through Brown Grove Preservation Group. The importance of increasing our capacity to really teach and really get our community to understand environmental justice and why that is so important to our community, and how we can kind of redress our climate impacts, and getting our older residents to really understand that, and also getting younger residents to want to come back to the area and live and help fight for climate justice. So in some ways, we have made strides with our partnerships that have helped us increase our own EJ capacity, like even my ability to write grants. That's kind of my part in this whole preservation group, is help writing grants and having ideas on how to create funding in order to resolve some of our issues. Another thing too is our partnership with the EPA EJ screen, or the EPA, so that they can come out and do evaluations, so we can be a part of the EPA EJ screen. We also have our own, like, the very preliminary mapping tools to kind of delineate our different climate impact, climate hazards and environmental hazards in the area. Yes, and this goes back to my usage. We pass out. Okay, I guess, yeah, if we have past time, I can finish with just saying that, well, thank you for listening. If you want to have any contact or support with our uh, community efforts, this is all of our social media, and it's all our social media where you can learn more about our history, and then also you can learn more how to help us protect our community and protect Hanover in general.
Thank you, Zaki. Extremely comprehensive. Wow. I mean, to be in the actual community and be very hands-on and see what's happening around you. The amount of EJ issues you mentioned, like I can't even imagining. But it sounds like there are movements moving forward. Climate action plans are extremely important, and I feel like there's so much information within this presentation. I could have listened for so long. I'm so sorry that we have a set amount of time. But please, everybody, if you have questions for Zaki or any of the other fellows, please drop them in the comments right now. And if you needed to get more information from our fellows as well, we can re-put that like last slide information page back up if you didn't catch that. I did see one particular question coming in for Richard. The question is, who did Richard partner with for his capstone?
Yeah, so thanks to Bart to Siege, I was connected with the Mid-Atlantic Justice Coalition. So Jennifer Coons was a great sounding board throughout this process. Plan on working with her moving forward and hopefully seeing what we can do with that coalition building and convening to kind of get a cumulative impacts bill through Maryland. So yeah, Mid-Atlantic Justice Coalition, or specifically Jennifer Coons on behalf of that organization. So I know the ties is always an interesting thing. So yeah, thanks.
Yes. And the Mid-Atlantic Justice Coalition is also one of Dr. Wilson's like near and dear coalitions. He's one of the founders, I believe. So definitely he was happy. He was like, yes, let's make sure we get some link him with Jennifer so that they can move forward with that. And so within this space, we wanted our climate justice fellows to be linked with or partnered with some of our Match partners. I know you've probably heard Match and TikTok for this entire symposium, but that was really one of the main goals for this capstone. And also to just encourage community and community action, community partnerships, and also connectivity between our members as well. I know that some have, we've been able to kind of share resources, and they've been able to go to each other if they need any other connections. So, but I love this balance of working, like Zaki working within his own community and working within the cultivation group that is near and dear to him, and then even Laura using Shen, a connection that she's had for years, and we've done a lot of work with Maria Payan and Michael Payan as a community, as a center, I should say. So it's really I was thoroughly impressed by all of your presentations, and I'm thoroughly impressed that you did it within 15 minutes too. So kudos to y'all. I'm so happy to be a part of this program. I'm so happy you're part of this program. And, yes, so we have in the chat, fellows, are you feeling hopeful, overwhelmed, or both? Thank you for that question, Stephanie, who is also a climate justice fellow, I should say. So I think this is a question for you all. And after this question, we'll end the session. So please, anybody jump in.
I can jump in on this one. I think that the work that has come out of what I've been doing has been amazing. I think that the fact that the EPA opened the complaint is a huge step forward. but definitely feeling pretty overwhelmed. I mean, this is an issue that spans especially all over the East Coast. You know, you're thinking about North Carolina, Delmarva. So there's a lot to be done. And I think that especially when it comes to like how we're mitigating the climate crisis, I mean, this has been something that has been pitched as such a wonderful idea, and it's still impacting communities, and it's still, you know, being placed in those that are marginalized and unable to speak out. So I think that definitely a feeling of both, at least on my end. So yeah.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Oh, camera.
I'll go. Cynthia's not going to go. Okay. I mean, for me, it's also a healthy mix. I think the encouraging thing on the hopeful front is we are in a very specific moment where there's a lot going into this space. There's a lot of attention being given to environmental justice. And I think the hopeful part is with all the resources and data that's coming out, there is an opportunity for some positive change. I think the overwhelming or frightening part is, you know, historically, these things aren't always they don't always get the spotlight consistently, right? So it's kind of a little mix of this kind of feels like it has to get done right now, correctly now. Otherwise, we don't know what the next iteration of it kind of looks like. So definitely hopeful, but also just mindful that this does kind of feel like a special moment.
Right. Thank you so much. So with that being said, thank you all for joining us for Climate Justice Fellows Session 1. Thank you to our fellows. Thank you to all who are viewing. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions today, or just have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Take care.